This is Tony Wright here, FLCC and AB Wright Ministries. This is day number 36 of our 90-day Bible study. We're going to start out in Nehemiah, but we're going to end up over in the book of Job. Hoo-wee, boy. This reading today took us on a voyage. Do you hear me? Now, we still had about half of a chapter to finish up in Nehemiah. Then we went through the book of Esther and into the first 7 chapters or so in the book of Job. And this stuff right here, I'm trying to tell you, oh my goodness. First of all, in closing out Nehemiah, the only thing that was left for Nehemiah to do was to have them put away or get rid of all those doggone foreign wives. Did you see that? Now, that's the same thing that Ezra closed out doing. You know, that was more than 13 years ago, but my goodness. Now, by the time that Nehemiah arrived, they're right back at it. These jokers are just infatuated with the women from these nations around them. And that's one of the major causes, though, of them continually drifting into worshiping all these doggone crazy gods and idols from all these countries. And then Ezra, remember, he reasoned with them, try to convince them they shouldn't have all these foreign wives. Not this brother, Nehemiah. Nehemiah said that he contended with them. Contended, that's what heavyweight boxers do. They contend for the belt, okay? And Nehemiah said, and he cursed them, and he smote certain ones of them and plucked off their hair. And then there was the one that had married Sanballat's daughter. Yeah, same Sanballat that him and Tobiah had given Nehemiah and the Jews all that grief about building the wall. Yeah, that's Sanballat. Well, he chased off the guy that married his daughter. Boy, Nehemiah, he didn't play a bit. So if y'all see me cursing and chasing after people with a stick, I'm just saying. Now, the account of Esther's life is situated on the timeline between the events that we found in chapter 6 and 7 in Ezra. Those events happened between the first return that was led by Zerubbabel and the second return that was led by Ezra. That's where the story of Esther fits in between those two events. Now, the story of Esther, though, gives us some insight into the lives of the Jewish people that stayed behind in Persia. The ones that stayed instead of returning to Jerusalem after the exile. And we can see God working on behalf of his people all throughout the events in this book of Esther. Although we don't see, God in a direct mention of God's name there, we see him working it for his people, on behalf of his people all throughout the book. Now, there's a serious danger that's been posed by those Jews there, by the plotting and planning of this dude named Haman. But we also find in this book a special display of courage in the actions that Esther takes. Now, one definite takeaway from the book of Esther is that God uses ordinary people, just everyday men and women, and through their faith in him, they're able to overcome. Now, they overcome at times what seems to be impossible odds. And they do those things that God has purposed to just get them done, right? So, the first 4 chapters in this book of Esther describes the threat to the Jews. And then chapters 5 through 10, we see where the Jews would triumph. Now, we come into the story, though, at a palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. The king, and he was having this big banquet. And he wanted to show off all his royal glory in front of the people of Susa. So he wants to also show off his wife, Queen Vashti, and show off her beauty in front of the people. But she was not going to play his game. And she refused to appear. What in the world? So let me tell you, all you brothers out there, something. Even the king doesn't get to make the call on those kinds of shots. So slow your roll. Boy, I might have just saved somebody's marriage right there. Anyway, the king is counseled to go on and get rid of Queen Vashti, seek another queen. Because the men there, they feared that other women would, they get too bold and brazen if Queen Vashti is allowed to go unpunished. So Esther, she later finds favor in the eyes of the king, and she wins the royal beauty pageant. And then her uncle Mordecai had instructed her that she was not to reveal that she's Jewish, though. And then later, with Queen Esther's help, Mordecai was able to warn the king of an assassination plot from some of his chambermaids. And this deed was actually recorded in the palace records. Meanwhile, though, this dude named Haman, he had become the captain of the princes. But Mordecai refused to bow to him. And then when Haman learned that Mordecai was a Jew, boy, he began to plot for a whole year to eliminate all the Jews. Can you believe that? This dude went a whole year plotting and planning, raging and hatred building and building. And did you notice that he cast lots every day throughout that year so that he could find the best way to have our Jews killed? Now remember, these people only usually cast lots when it was a real important matter. Boy, it's easy to see what was important to Haman, huh? Now, he used a combination of lies and bribery, and he convinced the king to issue this decree that all Jews in the empire would be slain on a certain day, 11 months out in the future. What? Are you kidding me? The king had been conned into putting out an edict that stated that all Jews were going to be killed 11 months in the future. What in the world? And that means that all the Jews have been put on death row. This Haman dude, boy, he is evil. You hear me? And he's determined to carry out this evil plot, though. Now, you know that this decree, it pretty much created a state of panic and confusion for the Jews. So Mordecai, he asked Esther to appeal to the king to spare the Jews. And Esther, she was a little bit reluctant, because she still hadn't told the king, about that little teeny tiny issue that she was a Jew. But still, at the risk of her own life, Esther decides to go to the king, reveal her nationality, and to at least make an effort to have the king deter his decree. Well, Mordecai, he convinced her that she's been, called to this high position just for this purpose. Now, this is a tough one. Does Mordecai really think that she was placed there for such a time as this? Or is he really thinking about Mordecai? Maybe dangling from a rope, Anyway, after fasting over it, Esther, she went on to appear before the king. And that alone was chancy, because you couldn't go before the king unless he either called you or you were invited. But she mustered up the faith and she mustered up her confidence. She went. And she wisely, though, invited him to a banquet along with Haman. Then at that banquet, she requested that they attend a second banquet. Now, this was really just kind of a stall tactic. She was still trying to figure out how she was going to, make her request. And then, she had to find just the right moment to do that. So Haman, of course, he's eating this attention up. You hear me? This dude wanted to spend all the time that he could in front of the king. Did you ever know people like that? They felt like they were somebody just by being around somebody else. This dude right here, let me tell you. Then Haman saw Mordecai. He came out of the banquet and he lost it. He went to another state of rage, and his wife suggested he build this large gallows for Mordecai. This joker can't even wait 11 months before he snuffs out Mordecai. So that night, the king, he couldn't sleep. So he had them bring in and read all the palace records to him. And while they were reading these records, he found out that it was actually Mordecai that had saved his life from that plot of the two chambermaids previously. So the king wanted Mordecai to be honored. So the king went the next day. He asked Haman, how should he honor somebody? That, what's the best way for him to really show honor in a big way to somebody he wants to honor? Well, Haman, he laid it on thick. Like, after all, who in the world would the king want to honor but him? So Haman tells the king how the honor should be bestowed in elaborate detail. Then he found out that the reward was for Mordecai. Boy, God would do it for you right in the presence of your enemies, won't he? So madman Haman got his bubble busted. He got humbled, knocked down a few notches. And now he's infuriated. He's forced to honor the man that he most can't stand. Yes, sir. At Esther's banquet, second banquet though, the king offered her as much as half his kingdom. This was for the third time he offered that. So she made her appeal for her people, and she accused Haman of having tricked the king into this treacherous deed of calling for the death of all the Jews. And after he know that she's a Jew, he was infuriated. So he had Haman hang on the same gallows that he intended to put Mordecai on. Now, since the Persian law, once something was sealed with the king's ring, it couldn't be revoked. So Esther requested that the king issue a second decree. And that one was sent out to all the provinces. And it basically said that Jews that could assemble and defend themselves on the day when this attack would come. So this decree changed what Haman had intended in that first order. Now Mordecai got promoted and he got placed over the house of Haman. And then we move on to the book of Job. And this book of Job, it's dealing with some life-changing crises, you know, in the life of a great man who's faithful to God and everything. And Job had lost everything he had in these back-to-back events. He lost his wealth. He lost his family. Then as a final and nearly fatal blow, he lost his health. And this sudden series of disastrous events caused him to grapple with the question, why? Have you ever been there? Not that you lost everything, like this brother right here, but some event or events, something happened. And it just seemed that you couldn't make any rhyme or reason out of what took place. So you find yourself asking, why? Now the book starts out with this heavily challenging interaction between God and Satan. Then next thing you know, you find yourself with this earthly challenging interaction between Job and his friends. So when you envision those candidates that are going to be in for total disaster, it's usually not a person like Job that comes to mind, because Job is a person with a pretty solid moral integrity, you know. And from what is described and shown up front here, he's put forth some pretty selfless service to God. And in that discussion between God and Satan, though he's certain that nobody can love God just for pure motive, that they're only in it for material things. Anybody need to check on anything? Okay. So to disprove though Satan's accusation, God allowed him to strike Job with some series of assaults. So the challenges though were so difficult that Job came to regret the day he was born. But Job refused to deny God. Then 3 of Job's friends show up, and they each come to very wrong conclusions about why Job is going through what he's going through. Now I used to be pretty hard on these dudes, and then I thought about it. You know, Job, he was a pretty wealthy guy. So no doubt he had quite a few of what one would call friends, you know. And then when he was all stricken, and, you know, out of all those so-called friends, at least these 3 thought enough of Job to show up. Hey, speaking of showing up, show up again tomorrow. We'll be back. But until then, please keep reading this word. Please keep checking us out on social media. You know, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, your choice. And then reach out and tell your friends, tell your neighbors that FLCC is on the move. We're taking ministry back to the first love. Peace.